Michael Steele, what can you tell us about where this lawsuit is? If you can't speak to the specifics of what the Times is reporting and these internal documents that have been produced, where does this lawsuit stand?
Well, this lawsuit was brought by a former Dominion employee, 𝘿𝙚𝙖𝙙𝙙𝙀, and that is a separate effort from my work for Dominion voting systems. I think it reminds us, though, that these facts were not just knowably false. These claims that the president's supporters are making were not just knowably false, they were easily knowably false. And the effort that went into assembling this memo seems to have involved a simple Google search. It was very easy and obvious that what they were trying to portray as reality was simply not true.
You know, Harry Lepman, I want to come to you and I want to really understand what this former Dominion employee is trying to prove and how these internal documents help his case.
He's trying to prove defamation, and where the case stands exactly is they've come in and said dismiss it, and he said, I have evidence, and here is the evidence. So he's trying to prove that Sidney Powell, Mike Lindell of MyPillow, and Rudy Giuliani knowingly or recklessly disregarded, very important here because they may say we never saw the memo, the facts, and made false statements, namely the ones that you've outlined. So this immeasurably strengthens his case, and it's for hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's not hyperbolic given the potential damages to Dominion here.
Harry, I want to play some of the public statements, just in case people forget how specific they were. Let's watch. We'll talk on the other side.
What we are really dealing with here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States.
This is not a singular voter fraud in one state. This pattern repeats itself in a number of states, almost exactly the same pattern. I think the logical conclusion is this is a common plan, a common scheme. It comes right directly from the Democrat Party, and it comes from the candidate.
So, Harry, Sidney Powell, again, is also being sued by Dominion, I think, for close to $1 billion. She says this.
That's right.
What we are dealing with here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections. Rudy goes on and makes similarly specific claims. This happens 5 days after the campaign has not just had a meeting where they say the stuff Sidney Powell is saying, the stuff Rudy Giuliani is saying is really out there. That's what happens on a normal campaign. I was the communications director on a campaign. When you're nervous about where the principles are going, you have a meeting. For you to go to the point of creating a document, doing its internal oppo, you do oppo on your own principles, and to put in a memo how wrong they are, is to cover your own ass. There's no polite way to say it. Do you think they were worried about their legal exposure in mid-November?
Of course. And can you imagine the brazenness of this up is down and down is up? And for Giuliani and Powell, there's another problem, Nicole. They've got all kinds of problems in the defamation side, but as lawyers, they're not allowed to make deceptive claims of fact in their representation of a client. That's why Powell was fined $200,000 in Michigan. But the memo that the campaign orders up is both to know the facts, but also because you're out there lying, it's a potential problem. But it's the real problem once you've been sued for defamation. Powell and Giuliani and Lindell are in a world of hurt.
Jonathan Lemire, you covered the Trump White House. You covered the Trump political efforts in the campaign. I want to read some more about what this memo is. A pretty extraordinary memo from the campaign communications staff. It established, it proves out, and it has documents, news articles, and others, as Michael Steele said, things you can find on Google, that prove out that Dominion did not use voting technology from Smartmatic, that Dominion had no direct ties to Venezuela or Mr. Soros, that there was no evidence that Dominion's leadership had any connections to left-wing Antifa, as Ms. Powell claimed over and over and over again, And as Mr. Coomer, that's the former employee, his lawyers wrote in their motion, the memo produced by the Trump campaign shows that internally the Trump campaign found there was no evidence to support the conspiracy theories regarding Dominion. Jonathan, if you had to estimate how many times after that memo was created, the Dominion voting company was smeared by Sidney Powell or Rudy or Trump, 5 times, 10 times, 30 times, how many times?
Oh, dozens of times, I would say, and that's probably conservative. It was nearly in every media appearance by Powell or Giuliani, even when they were careful not to say it in a courtroom itself, but they would stand outside and say these things. Or the infamous news conference at the RNC headquarters when Giuliani had hair dye streaming down his face, streaked with sweat. There was all-out lies, and it wasn't. And as this reporting indicates, they knew themselves. The memo was there, that there were no ties to Soros or Antifa or Venezuela. That's strike 1, 2, and 3. And frankly, we could go 4, 5, and 6 if it weren't against the rules of baseball. But this is what they did. The people working for the then president, people close to the president, engaged in, it's not just falsehoods or untruths, they were lies. They were lies. And they were perpetuating a fraud in order to claim that the election was illegitimate and that therefore that Joe Biden shouldn't have been elected president. And there seems to be no level they wouldn't stoop.
Michael Steele, I wonder if you can sort of quantify how much material, like what the Times reports today, has been generated by Dominion's defamation lawsuits.
I can't talk about our discovery specifically, but I can say that there will be an extensive discovery process, and I think that I am speculating here, but I think this is the beginning, not the end, of a stream of revelations from the Trump campaign, the Trump White House, perhaps even the RNC, and this web of deceit that was created to try and claim that he didn't lose the election.
Donna, the country suffered. The country is still suffering. The insurrectionists are obviously to blame for their crimes and their criminal conduct. They've broken laws. And they believe, many of them tell judges, that they believe they were guests of the president and that they assaulted and mutilated the bodies of police officers because Donald Trump sent them there to do so. We have a country in which 40% of the whole population, 78% of all Republicans, do not believe Joe Biden is a legitimate president, and that has all sorts of repercussions for our country. We have 40% of the public that doesn't trust science or doctors or medicine. But we don't have any recourse, right? But a company does. And it would appear that there could be something instructive about the fact that a company like Dominion may have more recourse against deadly lies than any of the rest of us.
Well, they do. And it's a reminder to us of why, as lawyers, we view the process of discovery so important and crucial to our legal system, because that is how we uncover things that we thought might have been buried, but we don't know for sure. And I think, the recourse here, and it's shocking to me that Donald Trump himself has not yet been sued. And maybe we're waiting for that. But when you look at the allegations, think about the time when the leaked telephone call with the Georgia Secretary of State, where the President of the United States continued to make those claims, and where the linchpin here is Rudy Giuliani, acting both as a lawyer, a spokesperson, and the connective tissue with the campaign and Donald Trump. So I expect that we are going to see more exposure. And thank goodness we have this civil system in which a company can bring to justice this campaign and through these allegations in a way that we can't individually.
In our politics lead, she was one of the most prominent voices pushing the big lie on behalf of Donald Trump. But now right-wing lawyer Sidney Powell is admitting that the big lie was, well, a big lie. Using the old "you weren't supposed to actually believe me" defense previously deployed by Fox News in the face of a $1.3 billion defamation lawsuit from Dominion Voting System. CNN's Sarah Murray joins me now to discuss. Powell is basically claiming these claims were political theater, but she filed them in court, Sarah.
That's right, Jake. And you point out former President Donald Trump really elevated her profile. She was known for peddling these kind of right-wing fringe conspiracy theories, but he elevated her by bringing her into his legal team. And she was one of those voices we saw out there peddling these unsubstantiated claims about election fraud. So now in a new court filing, her attorneys are arguing these were just her opinions, that it was up to the public to form their own opinion about whether votes were actually changed by these election machines. And one of the lines in this court filing, her attorneys say no reasonable person would conclude that the statements were truly statements of fact. Now, of course, Jake, that's not how the former president, his legal team, Sidney Powell, even when she was distanced from the former president, represented this. They went out and told the American public that this was definitively what was happening.
Well, I don't know how reasonable or unreasonable they are, but millions of people believe the big lie, and there was an attack on the Capitol based on her lies, her claims, and now there might be very real consequences for voters because of these lies that she now acknowledges nobody was supposed to take seriously.
Well, there have been real consequences. I mean, I think that we have seen from the insurrection at the Capitol, and certainly just from the feedback that elected officials got, from the sentiment from many voters, people believed the big lie that the election was stolen. They believed that some of these machines had actually changed votes, even though there was no evidence to substantiate that. And we're seeing the next wave of those repercussions as we see a number of these bills introduced in Republican-led legislatures across the country that would further restrict voting rights. And we're seeing legislators say, people don't have trust in the electoral process. Of course, many of these Republicans who are saying that leave out the part that the reason people don't trust the electoral process is because Republicans were out there like Sidney Powell telling Americans they couldn't trust the process without any evidence to support it.
So people are dead, people are injured, and now there is a big effort to disenfranchise millions of Americans based on these lies that, we weren't supposed to believe.